Hey everybody, Pastor Mark here. How you doing? Welcome to Midday with Mark. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here for our next to last episode of Midday with Mark. Episode number 41, coming at you from Pandemic Pittsburgh, Pandemic Pennsylvania, Corona Coriopolis. Glad to have you here. Thanks for joining me from Coriopolis, Pennsylvania. No matter where you're listening to this from or watching it, I know had people as far away as Maine, as people as far away as Florida, and so we've had people watching in all different places and right here in Pittsburgh. So glad you're here. This is the next to last day, episode 41. And tomorrow will be it. Tomorrow will be the end of Midday with Mark as we're moving out of the shutdown and into a new phase here in Pennsylvania. So it's been my pleasure to be with you this whole time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've gotten something out of it. Go back and watch the old ones if you want. But thanks for coming and listening. This has a lot of views. Some watch it live, but a lot more people watch it later. So thanks for being here. So today, wrapping it up again for today. I don't know why I said that, but wrapping it up tomorrow. Today will be the final day. We're wrapping up this series that we've been doing. It's been it'll be a 5-week series called Simply Jesus, where we're looking at some things that Jesus simply said or did. And we're also using this book called The Myth of the American Dream. All right. So it's a great book. I recommend you go out and buy it. I think you'll enjoy it. Hey, before we start into that, want to remind you that starting not this Sunday, but next Sunday, the River Church is going, we're going to a drive-in format. So we'll have online stuff still, but we will have a drive-in format. You can come out and come to a live service out in the parking lot. You can sit in your car, you can bring a lawn chair, sit outside your car. But we would love to have you join us May 24th. That's Memorial Day weekend. Gonna have a couple special things with that too. Memorial Day weekend. And we're also going to have Mission Mahi food truck there. If you've never had Mission Mahi, you need to. All right. You need to have a Mission Mahi experience. So come out to the river, Franklin Park. Look us up at goriverchurch.com. You can check us out there, or look us up here right on Facebook, the river, Franklin Park, and you get our address. And come join us on Sunday, May 24th. We'd love to have you. All right, so we've been in this series where we're looking at out of this book called The Myth of the American Dream, where she really does, as she says on the cover, she reflects on a couple things like affluence, autonomy, safety, and power. So we've looked at power, we've looked at safety, we looked at affluence, and today we're going to look at autonomy. What does that mean? That just means autonomy being, I'm on my own, doing whatever I want. American dream is, part of it has become, hey, I'm just my own person. I'm finding my own truth, I'm doing my own thing. And so I'm just kind of out there living my life, and I don't need anybody else, and I'm not really connected to anybody else. Well, obviously she calls that a myth. But I love this story I want to read to you that she tells about, so her neighbor moves in. I can't remember where she lives, but she lives in an apartment at this point, and the lady that moves in, someone next to her, is from Afghanistan. In fact, she's a refugee. So her and her children and her husband came from Afghanistan, and she barely spoke any English, and she arrived in the United States and lived next to the author. And the author talks about how her church had a ministry to refugees, and so she went and she built a rapport with this lady. You call it a friendship at this point, maybe. She does become friends later on, but she goes, and at Christmas time, she brings this lady an Instapot. How many of you have an Instapot? Okay, so this is a refugee lady, immigrant. She brings her an Instapot. Okay, so this lady, the writer, brings an Instapot to this woman, and she's going to, hopefully like revolutionize her cooking, because she had been in her apartment and she had saw that this lady had this kind of pot that she had never seen before. And actually, the lady whose name is Marianne, she brought this pot from Afghanistan. So she had this kind of rickety pot that she brought from Afghanistan that she basically cooked everything in. So the American lady gets her an Instapot, and and here's what happens. Okay, it says, I delivered the boxes with pride to several of my friends. They all expressed surprise and gratitude. I delivered one to Maran too. I tried to explain how it worked, that it was a better version of the pot she had brought from Afghanistan. On my phone, I showed her a quick YouTube tutorial. We unpacked the gleaming silver and black contraption and plugged it in. Okay? I was so excited to share it and so sure they would make her life better and easier. Okay? Perhaps you already know where this story is going. The next few times I visited Maran, I didn't see the Instapot anywhere. Finally, I asked her about it. She waved her hand around her tiny, cramped kitchen. There was simply no room for a machine that big, one that needed to be plugged in and took up valuable counter space. No, she would keep using her pot, the one she had brought from her own country. She loved that pot. Giggling, she told me she had started to call it the magic pot. That's her own one she brought from Afghanistan. Why, I asked. Because everyone in the apartment complex wants to use it, she told me. She would cook her family's dinner on it, and then she would leave it on her front doorstep. A neighbor would pick it up, take it home, and cook her family's dinner. And then she would give it to someone else. Marianne waved her arm toward her window. Everyone wants to use my pot from Afghanistan. It is because it is magic, she said. It is because it cooks the very best food, just like our mothers cooked in a less amount of time. Then the writer writes this. I left that day thinking about the magic pot and the Instapot. My cultural value of efficiency was at odds with Maran's value of community. Did you get that? She said basically what she's saying is my American value of efficiency was at odds with Maran's value of community. See, the Instapot represented efficiency. Marwan was looking for community. It was the difference between a gleaming instant solution for one family and a communal pot that gets shared and used and loved by so many. The magic pot not only worked, but it accrued meaning and value with every meal made inside it. It brought people together. It met the needs of so many in a variety of ways, and it did not need me or my individualized solutions to do it. The magic pot came halfway around the world to cook food that has fed me and that my family and so many others have enjoyed. With its thick metal sides and indestructible life, I have to imagine that Maran's pot will survive long after I am dead and gone. It's a morbid, if comforting thought. Some items survive not only because they are sturdy, but because they are so intricately connected, not to modern progress or innovation, but because they are the cornerstone of neighborliness to their community. It's a pretty amazing story just about a pot and how a pot brought people together. And there was this value of community, not autonomy, not by myself. Then she writes this. She says, with Maran, I truly wanted to make my friend's life easier, but I also wanted to feel better. I wanted a psychological reprieve from the pressure that built up whenever I heard her share stories about her life in her country and when I saw with my own eyes how hard life was in my own city for her. I wanted to forget about the wars and the state-sanctioned violence that had made it necessary for her to flee her home to save the lives of her children. I wanted to gloss over the complex struggles of starting over in a new country in which a large portion of the population did not want you there, where she and her family were either resented and feared or simply patronized by those with good intentions. But my actual relationship with my actual neighbor forced me to step outside of my bubble, to embrace life, including all of its terrible complexities, just as it really was. A world where one shiny new kitchen appliance could not restore what the locusts had eaten. I love this woman. She writes beautifully as she talks about just how her desire, how she, once she got to know her neighbor, it changed how things were for her. And I want to close with one final story from this. This today is about Instapots and cars, okay? Instapots and small cars. Because this same neighbor, okay, she writes this. She says, several years into our friendship, Marwan treats me like a younger sister. Recently, she noticed the new to us car my husband had purchased, a tiny little shiny vehicle with good gas mileage and a cheap price tag. My husband was so proud of this car, a sign of frugality. But Marwan saw it differently. She had multiple children and no driver's license. Going to the grocery store for her was an immense undertaking, especially since we live in what is technically a food desert. Ever since she left her home country, she had been denied the simple pleasure of grocery shopping, of touching the food with her own hands. Now her husband got together with the other men and shopped once a week, using the long list she wrote as a guide for what the family would eat. Marwan took one look at our little car and said, "What? Did you not think of us when you bought this car?" I love this. Did you not think of us when you bought this car? My heart sank within me. Desperate to explain myself, our decision to purchase something that was cheap and reliable and that suited our small family's needs, Marwan shook her head. For someone with a big heart, she said, you sure do like small cars. We laughed together, but her honesty was a gift that cut several ways. She was pointing out that we come from different cultures with different values. My first impulse is usually to take care of myself first. I do not view Marwan's troubles as my own, as my responsibility in the way that families care for one another. I do not buy my food or my clothes or my cars in a way that connects me to the unescapable web of mutuality. I am lonely in my small car, saving on my gas bill, isolated as I hurtle down the streets to take care of my own personal errands. But friends who cook me good meals and tell the truth about their reality and mine help burst the bubble of my own making time and time again. It's a difference between life in community and life in autonomy. And I hope that one of the things that we've learned throughout this quarantine is, yes, there's been time with our family that's been increased, and there's a lot of good things that come out of it. But I hope it's reminded us of just how bad autonomy is, being completely separated from others, and how desperately we need community. You know, I've been hearing stories and over again of the increase of suicides and the increase of depression during this time as people are isolated from community. But the problem is, and the real truth is, and a lot of us have chosen that, we've chosen it even outside of quarantine. We have chosen to isolate ourselves from pretty much everybody. We might have one or two friends, but we don't get deeply involved in our church community. We don't get deeply involved in the lives of our neighbors. We don't get deeply involved with others, probably because we're just too stinking busy. We're just running around, only thinking of ourselves. And there is this danger to that. That is a pandemic. And there have been people in our culture who have been saying this for a very, very long time about where our culture was headed. And hopefully this is a reminder. And those words that I just read to you, beautiful words. She says, you didn't think of me when you bought your car? Wait, I'm your neighbor. I'm your friend. You didn't consider what my needs were when you bought that car? You for someone with such a big heart, you sure like small cars. Very interesting thought, and very interesting. The Instapot and the car teach them great lessons. Well, this whole idea of community runs very deep because Jesus called his disciples to be one. In the book of John, he calls them to be one. He says, by you being one, by you becoming community. See, this is God's math. If you've ever lived in God's math is different than man's math, okay? When we are alone, we think we are one. When we are autonomous, this is what we teach ourselves in America. When I'm out there seeking my own truth, I'm out there seeking be you. I'm just one person and it's all about me. In God's economy and God's math, that ends up being zero. When you're just one, you end up being zero. But here's God's math. When you are together as a group, when you are together in community, when you are in deep community together, so it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. You know what that is in God's math? It's one. You become one. Jesus prayed that we would become one. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 put together equals 1. That's God's math. God's math, impossible math, but that is the math of the kingdom. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. And Jesus' prayer was that we would be one. That's God's math. And when you're out there on your own, you're not one, you're zero. You're not a community. And Jesus said the world would know that he was alive and that the world would know that he loves the world by how well we love each other. You can't love each other unless you're together. And I think this is probably a lot of pastors in America. This is their biggest, this is what depresses them probably more than anything, is people's lack of time to be in community with each other. And people really, truly being in deep community with each other. So what about you? Has the pandemic taught you anything? Has the pandemic taught you that you need community? Will you be different when we are out of this quarantine? Will you be different and will you seek community on a deeper level than you ever have? Will you seek to love your neighbor in a way that you never have? That's my prayer for you. I want to close with what the community that Jesus left behind. And so after Jesus died, resurrected, and ascended and left, the kind of community that they set up after he left, hearing his words that 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1, that we are one and we are in community. This is what Acts chapter 2, so this is the Acts of the Apostles. This is the type of community the apostles set up after Jesus left. It says this, chapter 2, verse 42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. That's community. Koinonia is the Greek word. To the breaking of bread, there was eating together, and to prayer. Okay? Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They shared their Instapots. They shared their pots they brought from their culture. They shared their cars. They didn't have any of those things. Well, they had the pots, but that was it. But you get the point. They had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Isn't that what that lady was getting at? You bought a car and you didn't think about me? You bought a car and you didn't think about maybe what would benefit our family? Aren't we friends? They sold property and possessions and give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. By the way, we can do this now. We can still do this. We can still meet every day. We can do it electronically. We can just touch base with each other. We can still gather in a way every day. It says every day they continued to meet together in temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They were in each other's homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Do you notice that? There was something about these people that it was infectious. It was attractive. And here's what happens when you're like that. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Every day, more and more people were coming because you know what? In that cruel world, just like our cruel world, when you saw a community of people that loved and cared for each other, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? Because you were tired of being alone. Because you knew that just being out there on your own, one person ended up being zero. But you knew in God's math, when you add 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, you get 1. And we are together as one. We are together as one. That's my prayer. Where do you need to change? When you get out of this pandemic, where do you need to change in light of community, of what what God is calling you to be in community, where will you change? How will you change about how you love your neighbor, how you love others, how you invest in the lives of others, how you allow them to invest in you, and how you place yourself in community, in vibrant community? That's my prayer for all of it. It's my prayer for me. That's what I'm seeking out. I hope you do too. Thanks for joining me today for Midday with Mark. One more to go. Tomorrow's it. Tune in, be here, share this with a friend. I hope you are in community today with somebody. Tomorrow we're out of quarantine and we're still going to be socially distant, but we can still love each other and we can still be in community. So that's my prayer for you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Be wise. Love others. All right. Love others. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.